All right, now the magic can happen.
Whoa. Okay, so I guess we tried to do an intro. I don't remember the format of the intro. Like it's
I
just
think
like
we did an intro last time.
yeah, I think we kind of skipped it and just did whatever.
In the first one, it took you like 10 minutes. You talked about topics, and then you got onto the introduction. But should we say that we're going to start in like the next 5 seconds and then go from there?
I think we should just sort of flow into it. Just do it.
Sure. All right then.
Just do it.
So in that case, do we have a title for this yet?
No,
Is
it's still the Untitled Podcast. I have no idea what we should call
We're
it.
kind of building up an episode backlog, and I guess we can kind of cut in a title and. Stuff
Okay,
at the
if
beginning.
one kind of emerges, because I was thinking so
Yeah.
far I've been calling it it's the Bill and Alan podcast, and then I'm going to be on the Bill and Alan podcast, and so it's kind of like the Bill and Ted, that kind of a double.
Well, now there's the three of
so
us. You
far.
can't do that.
Yeah.
I was trying to
And if we
figure
do
out a.
We end up with BAM. Sounds really like crap.
Bam.
The BAM podcast.
Pro tip. Bam.
Yeah, and then we could make it all punchy and get like really exciting sounds in there every time. We're like, oh, bam! And then like you're hit with a fact. That or like mab, which is kind of a close cousin of the word meh, I guess.
I don't think I think we should just pick some like tech thing.
Yeah, we'll make it clever, and then everyone will think we're clever. But and then we'll pretend that we came up with it before we even started the show.
Yeah.
And so like that's why all of these podcasts are unlisted currently. But when we finally come up with a name, whoa, hold on, who's got that sound?
It's Alan.
just playing an air horn
Perfect for
sound.
BAM. Yeah, we need more air horns.
Bam.
What the hell? All right, so I'm gonna try and do like sort of an intro-y thing.
Sure.
So what's a good sort of thing? Hello and welcome to the as yet unnamed podcast. Thank you, Alan. We talk about tech stuff sometimes, anyway. So I'll
I was
introduce.
doing sad violin music. Sorry.
So I am Bill Nunney, and I'm joined by Alan Hamlyn and Matthew Harris. Welcome.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Go in alphabetical order.
I'm Alan. Hey everybody. Thing is, didn't we do an intro last time? People are gonna know who we are every time.
But well, whatever.
People
But they don't know who you are, man.
Like yeah, no, I'm brand new. No one knows. I've been hiding in the shadows up until this point. I'm Matt, and I'm currently a programmer, and I program, but I'm way into video games. So I try and make my programming kind of circle around that, and most of my life is full of computer games. But I mostly build web apps. So yeah, that's me.
I think this is pretty interesting because our first topic we're talking about interview tests and Fizzbuzz and stuff. Did you have to do any of that for your recent job?
No, well, okay, so yeah, my background well, hold on, Bill, before we dive in. Who are you?
So I am Bill Nunney. I work with Alan at LocalVox. I guess it is Alan, isn't it?
It is. We yeah. We work at local box.
Yeah. Well, I don't
I can
know. So many
remember
things
really
have
where they
changed
work,
so
so-
quickly, you know.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
And we
I
make
used to,
web
I used to work
applications.
with Bill
Yeah.
and Alan, but no more, unfortunately. Maybe one day we will work together again. But they taught me everything I knew. But currently, I've just gone through a resignation and a hunt for a job, and I've just been hired in the last 3 weeks. So I went through the whole process. It was my first time like going through like recruitment, and I went through recruiters because I kind of left it late in my arrogance and was like, oh, recruiters, yeah, everyone's been contacting us and trying to poach us for ages. Let's see what they've got. So my advice to anybody is don't go through recruiters
They're awful
because they're... I don't want to blanket that because I'm sure there's some nice recruiters out there, but
people. No, there's none.
my experience was that, I mean, from a standpoint of any company trying to hire you, it's much better to them if you approach them having found them yourself. So, but anyway, to get to the particular topic at hand, which was testing and interview tests, each company does it slightly differently. And I guess it's an it depends kind of answer, where it depends on what the company needs from a programmer as to whether or not they're going to end up doing a test, or if it's more like live coding with them in the office, or whether or not it's a code sample or something like this. So some companies preferred like you coming into the office and sitting with them and you programming in front of them, and like either kind of paired programming or just kind of watching you do it, which if anyone wants to do that, don't do that. It's not a cool way of doing it, because you're just coding under pressure is just as bad as like, oh, can you just write out this method for me on the whiteboard? It's like, no.
It reminds me when you're doing a photo, something in Photoshop, and someone's sitting right behind you and going, move that up a little bit to the right, change that, make it blue.
Wow. No, but that's I would prefer that, because it would be like, oh, could you just write this method that does this? But instead it's just like, okay, write me an application with pen and paper that will process some messages and return
who does it on pen and paper?
Exactly. It's like, you're never going to do this. And one of them was, it felt like it's a school thing, I guess, because they're like, how do we do tests or exams on these people? And one of them was like, well, paper or whiteboard, right? But I didn't study computer science. I don't know if they did this in college or university. But anyway, this other one was like, and when you come in and you do this test, no external resources. And I'm like, what?
Like, in the age of the connected world, it's a bit ridiculous,
so,
isn't it?
So I was like, well, so where do you draw the line? Does external resources mean the internet? Or does it mean, say, because I use WebStorm, does it mean the downloaded documentation that I have? Am I allowed to use Dash, for instance? Can I use documents that I have on my laptop as an external resource? Or and then I'm like, so am I also allowed code hinting and like error reporting? Am I allowed JS hint like in my editor? Because these kinds of things are like external resources. If you're testing me as an engineer, or if you're testing my use of tools, for instance, I don't know one programmer that gets through a day, well, maybe a day, but not like the general like work without going to Stack Overflow or searching for somebody who's solved a problem before them, or design patents or something like that.
I don't think I could get through a day.
Exactly. So like you
don't need to remember everything. That doesn't make you a good or bad programmer. Not being able to remember every single thing.
I was, it's a red flag for anyone, I think, applying for work there. But to be fair, I guess, because I was level about it. I'm like, well, why this? Because you must have a reason, and it's all about testing how the engineer retains this information. So I guess how they do without these things. But I feel that the line is too blurry to really try and draw.
But that's not really a useful test, is it? Well, are they going to see if you're going to be able to code through the apocalypse and continue making the product?
No, like, I guess
when the power goes out and you have no internet and you have 3 hours on your laptop battery, can you still work?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're coding like in a war zone, or if they can't afford internet 1 month, are you still going to be able to continue working, I suppose?
But then what's the point programming something that's going to be used on the web without any internet?
I kind of maybe it's like somewhat equated to if you're a mathematician and you're not particularly good at mental arithmetic, but you can work out anything by writing it down or doing it on a computer or whatever. It's a similar kind of concept. Just because you can't do it in your head exactly, or you need to reference a function on what it works, how it works, doesn't necessarily make you a bad programmer.
Well, I watch a lot of the Stanford University videos, and like a lot of the professors can't remember things like fundamental constants because there's no point remembering them. They always say like they just have them written down somewhere and they just look them up. It's like
I remember a long time ago, and I think we've talked about it before. It's like transitive memory, where a memory usage is changing into kind of like a reference to where the information is, and so you can remember a lot more information if you can remember exactly how to get to it. And so instead of having to remember everything, you can remember like a database reference to where the information is.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So bringing it back
Indexing
to
information.
this like Fizzbuzz testing thing. I guess Matt, you're the only one who's had any actual experience with it because me and Alan have never had to do anything like that. Although I have run through the tests myself, and I've done them. It's just they're not like Fizzbuzz is like a silly test, which is not really that complex and doesn't really prove much in my eyes. But apparently, I read it was an article by Joel Spolsky. Let's see if I can find it at some point. But it's there was some research done on applicants to programming positions, and it was something like 90% of the applicants could not even program. So it's like, they were like computer science graduates maybe who don't actually know programming, and they couldn't write a Fizzbuzz program, which is like one of the most basic programs you could possibly write. Once you understand the requirements of it, it's not difficult to do.
So for everybody else, why don't you describe what Fizzbuzz includes?
Sorry?
Describe the Fizzbuzz test, what it is for everyone who doesn't know.
So Fizzbuzz is for every, I think it's multiple of 3, you output Fizz, and every multiple of 5, you output Buzz, and then if both of them are true, then you output Fizzbuzz. And then for anything else, you output the current iteration number, and you do that in a loop up to 100, basically. That's it. That's all it is.
But because supposedly it's outside of normality for what you might learn on a computer science course. That's the idea, right? That it's actually quite difficult to reason about and create.
I guess so. It's not like this test has been around for a long time. I don't know where it came from or anything, but to me it doesn't really. Maybe it does. It just proves you have sort of basic
problem solving.
Yeah, basic problem solving skills, right? So
yeah. So I've never had to directly do the Fizzbuzz test, apart from I did it maybe when I was learning stuff on Code Academy, like way back when, and so there was one, and I recommend that anybody goes and just to improve themselves. Like, well, there's Code Academy for getting started, and then recently, what's it called? HackerRank? Is it HackerRank?
Yeah.
The one I shared with you recently. So there was a guy that was hiring for my last company that would interview with a HackerRank problem. It was to do with sorting gemstones and stuff. That was I'd never seen HackerRank, and as soon as I checked it out, I'm like, yeah, something to really like exercise my brain with like algorithms, something that I wouldn't normally run into in my day-to-day stuff as a front-end developer. So I was checking that out, and there were some really cool things to mess around with algorithms and Node.js. So I was like, I'll do that. But my point is that like under pressure, understanding really what's required of you, especially if it's something like Fizzbuzz, because you're like, there's no mental way to really grip around that. Like, you'd have to, it works better if there's a real world example for some people, I feel. So when you have like, I need to sort this out to get that kind of output, or I need you to process the data in this way for that reason, that's easier, and especially easier when you're not under pressure in an interview. So when you're told these questions, you're like, but I don't even understand what you need this program to do. But given more of a relaxed state, saying just try and solve this and then get back to us, it's much easier. So there's something that locks up in the brain that isn't a good test when you're trying to interview someone, I think.
Do you know what I think is possibly better is just, like we've done with other hires, is looking at people's code examples, running through those and having them explain it back to you. And then obviously, if you can understand it, what they've done, and it's in the language that you're wanting from the programmer, and you can kind of look and go, well, this is the kind of thing I would write. Or, if it's similar patterns, or I understand why you did it this way, it's better than we've done it, kind of thing. And having them explain projects that they've made themselves.
Yeah.
It shows a couple of different things. One, you can take a look at their code. They're not under any pressure to do it, live, but they have written this code and it's their own project. And also it shows that they do have projects outside of their normal work, which, just shows that they're, again, programming enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would... I would always say a strong portfolio is better than anything else. Like having like that big like repository of stuff, like even like GitHub, like actual GitHub repositories, to show people like, yeah, this is my project. Look, I've done this stuff. That's pretty cool.
to loop this back into another topic I wanted to talk about at the end, because this is a nice segue into it, but this is to do with finding and making time for those kinds of personal projects. And should you, and do you, and how do you make that time? Because I remember it was actually when I was leaving you guys and joining another company, when this was like, because you guys were my firsts, so you taught me everything, but I didn't really have any personal projects. I just had the work that I did with you guys. So at that stage, they were like, have you got any personal projects to show? Have you got any work outside of your current job that you can show? And I'm like, no, I don't. And the reason was because I poured all of my time and effort into what we were doing. So, but then like that logical part of me is saying, if I had personal projects, then you would know that I don't spend like all of my time focusing on the job at hand. And I'm like, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's kind of a catch-22 where if you have lots of personal projects with lots of time invested, they're going to be wondering whether or not you're going to give them all of your attention. But
I think
so it's,
you're right. And it's something that's gone back and forth in my mind when I've interviewed candidates. But I think overall, it gives you an indication as to what type of employer it is. And if someone has personal projects and they don't hold it against you, it shows that to the employer that you are just dedicated and passionate. And if if you're able to make one of those projects so successful that you can go and do that, then they wouldn't stand in your way. And if they are willing to stand in your way because they think that you're going to go off and only work on your own stuff all the time and not do their stuff, then they're probably not a good employer overall.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there is, because I've looked at a lot of job specs recently, and a lot of them now, over half probably, I should have done some statistics on this whilst I was looking, but they, pretty much over half, they require that you have worked on open source projects.
Yes.
And so that's like you need to be able to show that. And from talking to a lot of developers here in London, that's not something that everyone's done. A lot of people, and that's now on their list to do. That and speaking in a public event is something that's just on people's lists to do for the sake of portfolio, but not really for the sake of their own benefit. Yeah. But it's for the sake of employability and I guess reputation. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, as if you get scared like I did in terms of like spending time on personal projects, it's also an important thing now to do as part of employability.
So how I do it is I tend to make personal projects kind of, if they can be like tooling, like making tools that help me in my everyday or other people in my everyday, then that's easy to justify for me for stuff that I can put like directly back into like my actual work. So it's like, for me, they're just supporting projects as well. Like, so they either help me learn a technology which we're going to use, or they're like, it's a tool that I can use every day. Like I have one for pre-commit hook management, which one of the other guys in our team is using. And I think, Alan, you've got it installed somewhere as well.
I do, yeah.
And that's an open source project. It's not owned by the company. I did it myself, but it's easy to justify, and I'm trying to get people around to using it. But
I think you're right. If you can do supporting projects that are open source like that, which the company can benefit from, and you can benefit from, and other team members can benefit from, then that's great. Otherwise, just finding time for any project, and if not, I think your answer was perfectly reasonable. I mean, you could show a lot of the work that you'd done, and it doesn't really matter. I think that you can have any personal projects, and I assume for you it didn't really make any difference in the end because you could show the just sheer volume of work you'd done before.
And it's also like in those situations, those hiring tend to have tests for those that don't have any code samples to show. Excuse me. They would tend to have a test for you to do, and then submit the code, and then they review that. So
right.
So yeah, I mean, like as opposed to like those supporting projects, though, obviously there are personal projects which are just like you're not going to share with anyone, or they're just open source. Like for me, I have a personal project at the moment which I'm working on, which is going to be open source, but it's not a supporting project. It's just like a password management thing. It's just a way for me to learn the new Apple programming language, Swift.
Oh, cool! Yeah,
which
Swift.
It's a really cool language, by the way. You should check it out. But anyway, it's for me that's actually pretty easy to get into because they have Xcode has this really nice playgrounds thing where you can just write code in a random place and have it execute, which is really cool. Yeah, that's finding time for it is just like, so for me, it's just kind of like, maybe if I like, it's the afternoon and I put a show on or whatever, I'll probably just bring my laptop up and just start messing around with code while doing that. So I don't know.
Nice.
My personal project that I dabble with from time to time is I've got a little population simulator hooked up to a MongoDB.
Oh wow,
database.
you're still going with that. I love that.
I do that, and then like I like introduce new factors into the population. So like the frequency of and then their jobs, and then like their income allows them to buy so much food, and I keep adding to it over time, and then like I just let the iterations run for each year.
Do you have an economic structure yet?
There is. I added economy to it. It started off with just birth and death rates, and then age, and then random probability of death after 75 and stuff like that, and then just random death. That's my little one that I play with, and it hooks up to a MongoDB database, so like you can have it in the children.
I don't know how to feel about it, but I love it. It's like it's kind of creepy and kind of beautiful and artistic and just fucking weird. So
it
well,
is.
it's kind of like the the old life sim stuff, the very first ones. I don't know what they're called though. You know, those little weird ones where it's like a simulated life. It's just called Life, I think. The simulation.
No, I haven't seen this. You mean like the one where like squares move across the screen?
Yeah.
And then they worked out like evolution works.
Yeah,
and finds life. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's the same thing, really, just a bit more
I
advanced.
think it's more like Populous.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's they're all based on that at its core, really, aren't they?
Okay, so for me, finding time for personal projects was difficult. I get too obsessed and obsessed with like one project, and then I'll perhaps burn myself out doing that. So it was finding a way to balance it. And I was talking to a guy at my last job, and for him, like he's like a dad with 3 kids, and he works like real long hours at work as well. And then so for him, I don't know if he learnt this from somebody else or some other book, but he finds 10 minutes in the morning, or is it 10 or 20 minutes in the morning? As soon as you wake up, you open your laptop or whatever, and you just work for like 10 to 20 minutes, and that's it. And if you stop at that point, but you have to do that amount. And if you have the time or the motivation, you keep going, and you do the same thing as soon as you get home from work. So you do those 2 times each day, whichever one you can. Best to do both, if not the morning. And you find those little segments help keep you going, because you don't want to break the chain. You want to do it every day. And those tiny little increments. Yeah, I mean, I broke it recently and I haven't been able to do it. But that's my fault. That's not. I don't think it's the fault of the system. But though I made a little because I've been working with React, the Facebook's front end.
How is it?
Really nice. Weirdly, and this is kind of a side topic, but the architecture that we came up with a while ago, like us guys for MVC, very much what React and Flux is. So that's cool. It uses a lot of like unidirectional data flow, event management, pub sub stuff. But what's really nice about React is a virtual DOM. Where I can compare and work out when to or when not to manipulate the DOM, which is an expensive operation. The great thing about React and Flux is, no like real tangled lines on your model diagrams and your flow charts and stuff.
Supposedly it makes it very good to do functional tests and other kinds of testing, because you can inject a state anywhere in the chain, because it's just one direction, right?
It's very nice, and I could talk for a while about it, but so I was like working with it, and I'm working with Browserify, so I can wrap my like node style scripts with module exports and stuff, and I can use them on the front end in the client. So I wanted to use sounds because I was making a card flip game as a personal project, and I realized that audio, HTML5 audio, is really confusing, like overly complicated, really. All I want to do, like in my mind as a programmer, I want to get a sound, I want to play a sound. I don't even really want to have to go and get the sound, I just want to play a sound. But the HTML5 audio spec requires you to fetch it as a certain type, and then decode an audio buffer, and then interlace all these different things. I'm like, okay, I'll do all these things. And so I had like this whole module full of promises and returning them, and I was like, finally, I have solved it. I have solved audio, especially with this Browserify bundling. and says, okay, let's open source this. Let's npm this. Because that's kind of what happens when you're making these scripts as Browserify. You end up with node packages, and so I do that. So now my personal project, which was originally to make a card flipping game with React and Flux, was now about this like node package I'd created called Neat Audio. And then I realized that it was really weird making a server-side script that runs audio in the browser. And then so it opened up this Pandora's box of like, should I be doing this? And then how do I test this? Do I need to put in like a checking for if the window exists and like all these different things? And so every day I would wake up, do 10, 15 minutes, realize that something about this was like I hadn't thought about, spend the rest of the day thinking about it. Lunchtime, I'd look up something and read about it, learn something new. And in the evening, I'd come home and try and fix it. Because all the way through the day, I'm like, crap, if somebody looks at my code now, they're just going to think that I'm really stupid. I need to quickly solve this. So you end up with this kind of like infinite loop.
Perpetual embarrassment, but want to try and fix it.
Exactly. So now I guess the problem comes when you stop being embarrassed. So now I have code up there on GitHub on my public repository that definitely doesn't work. And is also published on it as a node package. But you do learn lots of things doing it this way, and it does keep your project moving. So if anyone else is having trouble doing that, I highly recommend that method because it worked for me. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean that sounds interesting. I mean, I don't know that it would work for me, but maybe I could try that. But it's like 10 minutes. Like, isn't enough time.
You know, it's similar to what we're doing, Bill, at the moment. We've just started doing on Wednesdays, which kind of flows into one of our topics I think we can talk about, is FluBits, and we spend an hour programming together in the same...
oh, cool.
So have you heard of FluBits?
No, but tell me about it.
So FluBits is
go ahead.
FluBits is a pair programming service.
Oh,
and
cool.
It's a remote pair programming, but what it has very uniquely is plugins for certain IDEs, and namely for any of the IntelliJ plugin things. So you can do proper pair programming over a network or whatever, using your IntelliJ IDE with anything, and all of the other cool stuff that it has. And this was the main problem for me for all the web-based ones, was they didn't have any cool abilities like
it's pretty awesome.
IntelliSense and things like that. Or being able to, most of them don't even have the ability to run any code without paying for them, which is really annoying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, me and Alan found that, didn't we?
Yep.
That's
so
odd.
we found that. So we on a Wednesday spend an hour, and it'll probably evolve to be more or less or different times or whatever. But we're starting off just on a Wednesday, and we did the first time last week, and that's when we found this tool. And so we'll do it again on Wednesday, and we're progressing a project, and it's just a good way. And I like the social element of it. We hang out on. Over audio, and we can talk to each other, and we're programming in the same file, and it helps us both understand what we want to achieve at the same time, and it's a lot of fun.
The differentiator with FluBits is you can share an entire project. So if you create a new class or whatever in a new file, that's also shared over it's called a workspace. So shared over the workspace, so whoever's in that file will see those things happening in real time, which is really, really, really cool. It is a pay-for service though, after... It's like a 14-day trial, but it kind of works the same way that Git does, where if you have 5 private workspaces, that's your that's how much you pay for. It's done the same way as private repositories.
But they do free public ones. So if you're doing some open source project, you can just do they have a little badge you can put on your GitHub page to show when you're programming, and people can just watch you program.
Yeah, people could just watch you. I love that idea. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So there was tools like this before, right? So what makes this unique and better than the others? So
you got Coda by Panic, which when we looked at their website again to see where they've gone, their website looks like crap now, and I don't know, they're now no longer on the App Store, and I just assume that they're just kind of not pushing that particular product as hard as they were before. But it was only across the local network.
It's pretty expensive as well.
It's expensive, and it's not a great IDE overall, but they haven't seemed to have developed any further. So it's local network. And then you've got ones which are in browser. There's tons of them, and there are some pretty good ones. In fact, we couldn't find one that we were trying to find initially that we'd found recently, which was a GitHub project, I think. But of course, in the browser, you don't get all your IDE stuff. You don't get to, no code hinting or anything like that we get used to. So this one particularly is good because it's a plugin for an IDE that we already use, or many other people hopefully use.
Yeah,
they plug into other popular IDEs as well. I think Sublime was in there, and well, it's text editor, but it's still,
There's a Vim one as well.
There's a Vim one, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So
so yeah, just to add a little note here, we're not sponsored by these guys because it sounds like a massive advert right now. And what makes this unique over other?
Yeah,
we're just really excited about it.
But that's not all. If you sign up today. Yeah,
so that sounds really cool because
it's a lot of fun.
I always feel like that should have. I don't know how much of a private thing programming is. And when I first heard about paired programming, I remember it was like a few years ago with you guys, and it was, the idea really didn't sit right with me. Because why would you want to do that? That's inefficient. It's two guys, one code. It's like, so.
It is inefficient to a point.
But then this was like to do with I remember it was a Valve thing where it was about finding the way that you work best. Mm-hmm. So for some people it's an office to themselves. Sometimes it's an office with a couple of other people. Other people, they like to work in co-working areas, and everyone works differently.
It does.
So that's the important thing. And I found really when I'm analyzing it, I work really well in paired programming. If I ever hit a problem or somebody else needs some help, I really thoroughly enjoy paired programming. It's great to learn, great to teach, great to like understand it, and doing like it's actually efficient for parallel code review, because a lot of the things that we do is when you're ready to bring some code into master, you will do a code review, you do a pull request, and people go through it. But if you paired program, you might want to get a third guy or a third girl to check it over, but pretty much you've already done that with paired programming, so that's good.
There's some benefits from it. So first of all, I think, there are some bad points about at least this form of paired programming, is that if you're both in the same file, it's a little quirky. Sometimes your cursor ends up on a random line and you're confused as to why or whatever. So it's a little, things are a little buggy and not as you expect. But you can work around it, and of course, a good IDE tells you when you've broken something by accident or whatever. But the other good thing about it is, if this is a casual project that we're both working on, and there isn't like full documentation and full understanding of what the project is, and it's evolving over time. And it's fun to sit on a Skype call or whatever and just, talk it over and iterate through the call and through that hour that you're working together. I just find it incredibly fun and satisfying.
The collaboration.
So it works.
The collaboration is the best part of it, obviously. I mean,
and
you're using two brains effectively. Well, for me, the problem with paired programming before was that it's like, how would it work? Like you would have two people sitting at the same keyboard or screen.
Yeah, it was like one of the rules I thought was that it's one computer. So because if you have one each, one person will tend to get distracted, and you're not really working together. You're just working next to each other.
Exactly.
So I'll be interested how you guys do that. If because I would imagine if you're working in one file and you're changing if it's like building something new and you're going to change the interface to a class or something, then you're going to break it for the other person. So because it's like essentially working next to somebody, but the code is constantly being integrated.
Well, what you would what you would do is you would just say, I'm going to do this. and then you'd be like, okay.
Huge social point to it. Yeah. The other final part of it is like you said, doing like 10 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the morning, or whatever it is, or even if you were just to set a time per week on your own to do it, there's something about having the extra motivation of doing it with someone that if you don't do it, then you're letting the other person down. So I think it reinforces even more that you get the regular, and it helps build that routine to build that little personal project that you might fall off and not do otherwise.
I like that. That's cool.
So
I'm gonna have to try that out.
And in fact, you could join us for a session, maybe perhaps sometime, and see what you think.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Can you get like a trial version?
Yeah, you can just join. I think.
I can invite you basically.
For how much? If we use the code the Bill Allen and Matt podcast, then you could get up to $5 off this week.
Using this promotional code X15.
All right, we should iterate that. Impressed upon the fact that we're not promoting any of these products, so we just happened to stumble across these, and
it's just really cool.
It is cool.
All right,
so look at what else.
What have we got next? Who wants to talk about something?
I'm gonna skip the topic we got in this list because I really want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while, and it's probably very self-indulgent to talk about it, but I want to write a blog post about it, and I can't get around to sorting out my blog, which is another personal project. So I'm going to talk about it here, and that's over-the-shoulder installs. Or over-the-shoulder sign-ups or something like this, and it's something that I haven't read about before, so I wanted to discuss it, and this is a good place to do it. Where I became conscious of this. Do you know? You guys got to know. Do you know the app Yo, where it's just yeah?
I've heard of it. It sounds ridiculous.
I don't know what it is.
It's so for everybody else, it's an app where you add somebody by their username on the Yo app, and then all you can do is hit their username on your app. It's very minimalistic and colorful. You hit their username and it will, on the corresponding user's phone, or you can do it to Slack even, it will just say Yo. You can't set a specific message. You can't record a message. You can't do anything but trigger a Yo. And the guy, it did incredibly well. Like the guy just made it in however I haven't researched the story, but go and look up this thing because if you haven't,
they even raised the funding
ridiculous. He did. It was even if it was a he, I haven't checked any of this stuff, but it just blew my mind that such a simple thing could be so successful. But it's so funny, and that is what led to a lot of these over-the-shoulder installs. So I grabbed my girlfriend's phone. I'm like, just give me your phone. So I tried my hardest. It was password protected, so I couldn't the iTunes store. So I was trying my best to just install the Yo app on her phone and then set it up so that she just had to have it on there so I could Yo her. And everybody else has done this. All the people I know here in London, they're all getting it. You've got to get this app. Let me show you. And then they'll show you. They'll over the shoulder make you install. They'll make you install the app, and they'll make you Yo, and they'll make you add these things. So it's I've never seen a Yo ad, right? No one's ever seen that. No. And it's not just even word of mouth. This is what I'm differentiating here. It's I'm denoting the difference between word of mouth or viral marketing with literally having somebody over your shoulder make you sign up for a service, teach you the basics, and so basically doing that onboarding for your service for you. And I think that you can have some really crappy services or really crappy apps that have and I'm not saying Yo is a crappy app, I'm just saying that services in general can be absolutely crap. But if you have something that people just have to set up for somebody else, or you see it with non-tech savvy people, and say Skype, where you have to get them okay, we're gonna get this camera for you, we're gonna set it up on your computer, and then you click this to do a call, and all these things that perhaps an app wouldn't have as part of their onboarding experience, but having somebody install it and do the onboarding for you over the shoulder is something that you never see in stats or anything. You would never really know that happened without talking to people and interviewing people.
I think it's something that's with younger generations, it's something that's getting more popular, and I think there's a shorter lifespan for some of these apps. There'll be the equivalent of a replacement to Yo in 6 months, years time that will again have the over the shoulder, which then replaces whatever Yo was doing, and then so on and so forth. And I think people there's less dedication to stay with that app for the long term. But there is something really interesting about getting that critical mass via an over-the-shoulder kind of install.
I guess though there are two kinds of over-the-shoulder we're talking about here, because that's kind of with the Yo thing. It sounds like it's more kind of a combination of, it's a viral word of mouth kind of thing. But when I think of over the shoulder kind of stuff, I'm kind of thinking someone's been paid to show someone how to install something. It's not just friends talking to each other and saying, install this, and then over the shoulder saying okay, do this, do that. But actually paying someone to do that, I don't know. Those are two separate things, right?
Maybe that's how they started. Maybe Yo was paid a few people to tell people about it, and then they in turn copied the behavior.
So I mean, I don't think obviously. That doesn't seem right, because that's just how apps tend to, popular apps tend to go. When anyone's showing someone
Uber
something.
Does. Uber pays people to go around and sit in other drivers' cars and then they try and onboard them there and then in the car.
Wait, how does that work?
So Uber will go to competitors. They'll pay people to take rides in competitors, and then try and steal the driver away by telling them about it. So it reminds me of it's not quite over the shoulder kind of install, but it's very similar.
But it's not like a user perspective. That's taking talent, isn't it?
No, not really. It's the users of the app. I mean, Uber requires drivers, and they're just a different type of user of the app.
That seems like more like trying to capture employees, though. Because that's essentially
it's
what
how they grow.
are.
They need more drivers to grow, and then people can take more rides and stuff. So
I kind of what's an alternative example of that, of something that happening elsewhere?
I mean, that's the closest I can think of.
Yeah, that's the most. That's the one in the news. But like in terms of seeing that blurry line between user and employee with something like Uber, if you would consider say Google Mail, where you don't pay for the service because you are, you're the product. They'll analyze your mail and send you adverts. So in the same way that people who drive for Uber, I feel like they serve a dual role, where they are the user, but they're also like part of the product.
Yeah.
So
so
like signing these guys up, I don't know how much of that would really take place in the car. Like, oh look, let me just set up an Uber account on the phone, and then like they do that, or whether or not it's like, have you heard about this great service?
No, they do. I heard an interview about it. They literally get in the car and then they take them through the whole thing, and so you could be making more money and have them sign up and everything, and then they get a commission for it. I think they get paid like $1,000 per driver or something crazy.
So there you go. I didn't realize how topical this would be.
That's pretty aggressive.
Uber's business practices are extremely aggressive.
I guess they have to be though, because they've been a counter aggressive, like back to them, haven't they? By like cities and stuff.
I mean, there's all kinds of problems. I mean, people trying to stand in the way of progress, I think, but this is a different topic. I think we could probably talk about Uber and their business practices and governments standing in the way.
Let's not get political.
No, let's stay tech. Let's back away from political stance.
I'm not touching any politics. Jesus.
I'm definitely putting a politics topic in next week. The most controversial I can think of.
Programming and politics.
Yeah. Was it? We were discussing this like a couple of years ago. It was to do with. Was it? I don't know. Like the most headliney way of putting this was open sourcing government. Basically putting in Git control for the government, right? The idea that they would have like, I guess, a bunch of modules or laws or something, and people would make pull requests into government. And,
I think it would be awesome for policy. Anyone could make policy.
This was the topic of a Clay Shirky talk, I think, wasn't it?
I mean, I think Clay Shirky has definitely talked about this kind of thing. But overall, I mean, from a technical standpoint, there is literally nothing stopping modern Western governments from using, Git style or version controlled stuff where people can submit revisions to policy. We live in a world where this is actually now possible, and the people who live in the countries can actually determine policy by sending requests, changes.
Yeah. And the people will like vote on them or something, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different to any open source project. You take the best changes.
I just imagine everybody in the pull request saying like +1, like everybody in the whole country +1ing something.
No, but like that would be the election. It's just like one pull request. I don't know, like changing ownership, and everyone they would measure how many +1s this guy got.
Change president got
merged in.
For the president, it's just a document with a name in it, and everyone does a pull request and changes the name.
Oh my god,
that would be perfect though. It would work well.
Yeah,
unless someone
just take the best name.
It's just because we're programmers. Like,
I think so.
It would be the best government.
It would be.
Git repository. That's probably very twisted to everybody else.
I think so. Yeah, I would love it. Git repository government.
I'm sure like people who aren't tech savvy would be like the worst thing in the world, just to completely like obfuscate it even further. Just like, oh yeah, no, you have to get a GitHub account and. Do you understand? I don't know. Let's try Gherkin. We'll write it all in Gherkin.
And you did a bad merge. Now we have double policy here.
but everything could be unit tested. So you'd have to conduct, say, like one murder a week, or like to pass the build, and then so you would see how that person would get convicted, or how they would be rehabilitated, and if they would be successfully rehabilitated, or maybe you put like some particularly aggressive people in a room, and you find out if your policies encourage them to work together or kill each other. And so
I'm all for it.
Anyway, we're kind of off topic here, but like I was thinking about this recently as like just as a hypothetical open source project. So obviously not, I don't know, it's never really meant for real politics, but it was the idea that what if, let's see what would happen if we were to try and put together this mythical government with open source laws and see where it went from there. But I couldn't be bothered to get it started.
Well, for a good example of it, you could look at the PSR standards Git repository, because that's pretty much how that works.
That's a smart idea. Yeah, I guess code style guidelines and
if it works for them, it could work for everybody else.
There's a whole bunch of them, and they all vote on things, and they submit pull requests and stuff and all that. It's pretty much that kind of. It's a small version of that, really.
For me as well, it's like you could go even further. But anyway, I think we should stop talking about that.
I made you all talk about politics. Yeah, I feel pretty proud of myself.
You did it. You made it happen, Jack.
All right, so we do one more?
Sure. Do you have one on?
Well, there's this rewrite thing.
Yeah. So let me introduce this one. So with job hunting recently, I've started, and I don't know if this is just because of the job hunting, but recently I've been starting a lot of projects. I now have a lot of different repositories that I'm maintaining and developing. And with working for the last 9 months on an Angular app, I've now been like looking into React and Flux, and a lot of several jobs were asking me, because they were kind of greenfield projects, what tools would you use to build this app, and what architectures would you use? And I was like, well, I don't know, because there's a lot of different factors. And there is, in my opinion, a lot of problems with Angular that can lead to some very badly architected apps, because it's very easy to do things wrong with Angular, and you end up anyway. So the point was, when is it right to rewrite your code base? Because I'm sure everyone's come across this at some point. They're like, oh my god, I can't carry on like this. We need to rewrite this needs to be rewritten. And from an engineering perspective, if it was solely and purely engineering, then that's fine, right? Time is nothing. You rewrite it, but we don't live in that world, and it's always about a balance between business and engineering. So that's something that was very difficult to get like my head around at the beginning, because I felt guilty. I always felt guilty that the code was bad or the architecture was bad, because we had to get projects done within a time limit. And that's important. But understanding that there always needs to be a balance between business and engineering. If you're in a startup and you're not just building the most perfect code ever, then that's fine. You can come to terms with it, as long as you don't get lazy. So there was a tweet from Adi Osmani that I read a while ago that really did it for me in terms of iteration, and that's do it, then do it right, and then do it better, or something along those lines. Where, to begin with, you can get kind of completely, this is just like me talking about the life cycle of what leads up to a rewrite. So first of all, you do it, and it can be in a pretty hacky way, because otherwise you spend too long editing yourself and thinking, oh, I'm going to need this, and I'm probably going to need that class, and these tests for this thing that we're going to need. But you might not need those things. So you do it, you build the minimum lovable product or whatever, and then you do it right. So then you make it architected correctly. If you can prove it, if you can prototype it and then get it done, right? Then you do it right. Then you look up all the completely correct ways of architecting your app. And then after that, you do it better. And that's kind of when that rewrite is meant to happen. So too often I see either people getting paralyzed, and that tends to be me, where they overly research something and they read everything and they try and get it completely right first time. And that's not cool, because you don't do anything and then you don't find out what's wrong or what's right. But then the next step of building it, the first time you build it, you might add loads of things that you think you're going to need. And that's an important thing I think what Bill shared with me a while ago. It's that a theory of like, you're not going to need it yet. You don't need this. So don't put in stuff that you think would be nice to have, or you think you're going to need in a month's time, because you might not. And then you have code to maintain that you never needed to put there or write in the first place.
Yeah.
So
I would start by you have to understand the problem you're trying to solve, and what happens is an evolution of that understanding. You may figure out that you have a pretty good understanding in the beginning, and then as you understand the problem better, or it changes slightly, or your understanding changes, that's when you start to iterate and make those changes that gets closer to doing it right, or doing it better. Probably closer to the doing it better part of that. I think there's certain patterns that you can do so that you have less throwaway code in terms of when you do the first stage of just doing it, so that when you come to doing it right, you have less changes to make from one leap to the other. It's more of an iterative process rather than throwing away kind of proof of concepts. But yeah, I mean, what do you think, Bill?
So I used to be a fan of the rewrite methodology where you would do that kind of process, but lately, in the last last 5 months or so, I've been more of a fan of the concept of constant redesign and refactoring rather than rewriting. So you basically always, if you need to change how something works, you incrementally change it to work how you understand it should work. And I like that more because you spend less time, and that there is a whole basis you need to be able to do this anyway. You need good unit tests in the beginning. You need all of that stuff. Otherwise, you can't refactor without unit tests. It's just a fact. But it's a way of dealing with code that you can't afford to break in one go. Like you can't just alienate your previous version users and then have two separate communities.
So, in the difference between, I guess, the area that you work in and the area that I'll work in, I've worked in a code base that didn't have that much test coverage. I mean, the percentage was roughly a third, and this was a balance thing between speed and engineering quality. Which was, it's painful, but it's the way it is. And therefore, we didn't have test coverage that would, be good enough to cover a refactor. But because we don't have anyone else apart from ourselves relying on our APIs or our interfaces or anything, we can refactor that. And we can rewrite it. We can do it differently. But the problem comes, there is many different avenues to talk about in terms of rewrite, but I would urge everybody, please never, ever leave a code system half refactored, especially if you do not leave documentation on how it was meant to be finished. It's like dying as an architect halfway through your building being constructed and not having any blueprints left for whoever picks it up afterwards. So it's like, is this meant to be the stairs or is this meant to be a cow shed? It's like, it's so difficult. And the problem was we ended up with two parallel architectures running and living in the same app.
Well, that sounds like it's more like someone trying to make a rewrite look like a refactor, because refactors aren't supposed to be visible. They're supposed to be, you make a small refactor. You can make a small
change,
and then you make, there's never any in between with a refactor. You maybe, if it's a large scale thing, then it's a little bit different, but that's more of a rewrite, right?
For me, the biggest, there's one huge challenge, and it goes back to what you originally mentioned about business goals and trying to balance these things in. That's always the enemy of a developer, is the progress versus business goals, and trying to fit in the changes you want to make within the business requirements. And I think that the fundamental issue really is the business. I was going to say government for some reason. The business, because we're talking about politics. Yes. The business has goals it needs to meet, and then so you have to continue making progress in the software. But at the same time, if you need to make a refactor, you take some time. So the question is, how can you add new stuff in and refactor to an end goal where everything is great, to a level where the test coverage is high and everything's there. And I think it's the way it's got to be done is the new stuff you add should fit into the end goal that you want to have, so that you're not adding more technical debt on top of technical debt. So that's really the trickiest thing of all, because what happens is if you've got, say 2 developers, one is adding features which are untested, and there's one who's trying to fix it, he never is going to catch up to the the latest one. So you end up adding more and more technical debt, which adds more bugs and blah blah blah, and you just never catch up.
So that sounds like a problem with programming processes, really, because that programmer should not be adding things which don't have tests.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
and so these are similar to the problems that we have in our what we're working on, myself and Bill, and it sounds like you've had similar problems as well, Matt.
Yeah. So this was another really interesting thing. There was a tweet that I couldn't find, and somebody brought this up, and it was like it was like one of those moments, and it was to do with rewrites. So the idea was that you might feel, well, there's 2 sides to this, so let me start with this one. The first one was if you feel that you need to rewrite the code because it's bad, and you rewrite that code, but you don't change what caused the problem in the first place that you needed the rewrite for, then you're just going to rewrite some more bad code. If there was a problem with process or understanding or like ignorance to a certain field or language, then a rewrite is not going to save you because you haven't changed what caused the problem in the first place. And the other side comes from, what was the guy's name? I put it in the notes. Alex Sexton, who was talking about like how version 2 of whatever you're building is likely to be better anyway, regardless of like, it was written in this particular framework.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that framework's crap. So let's rewrite it in this framework. Yeah, it's not about the framework so much as it's about understanding your product and your service or your field better, and that your second version is going to be better anyway.
And that's what I was saying to you, is the I mentioned before, is understanding the problem. And as you understand the problem, your understanding of the problem evolves. You're going to get better and better, and the longer you do something, the same problem you're trying to solve, in whether it's a large product or not, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to get better at it. But it's difficult if people are still adding new features with bad processes, or new code. It's not even features, I just say new code. Any new code being added to the base, even if it's fixing a bug. I mean, the whole reason for bugs existing is because programmers write in bugs. No bug existed except for someone writing it. I mean, there's not a magical beast. A programmer wrote a bug in. So if those design patterns aren't universal, then you can always have a programmer introducing bugs across the board. And like I said, you never catch up. And so even if you added, of all the work that you do, 20% processes, 20% of the time of the sprint is refactoring and improving test coverage. If the other 80% is adding new code to the base, you're never going to catch up.
So a thing about testing as well, there's a lot of negativity towards testing when you have people who haven't really done testing before. And that comes because there's a misconception that writing tests makes you slower, or doubles your work, or something stupid like that. But it actually doesn't. It makes you faster because you have something then to lean on. If you can just go and like for instance, I was doing like a huge API call refactor. First, I wrote tests for it so that I could refactor it, because you always have to start with the tests. And once that was done, I could just go nuts with the API call, because I know I could rip the whole thing out and start again if I wanted to.
I was writing it in like Hindi and then like wingdings. It was crazy.
You can just do whatever you want. And it's just like, because those tests are solid and they're going to be right. Obviously, there is a certain level of quality you have to hit when you're writing your tests. You have to make sure you're writing for those
It's as good cases. As the test you write, but the tests are usually simple, and that's the whole point. The simpler code you write, the better. I mean, that's why you refactor. Yeah. You're only refactoring to simplify, because you couldn't test it in the first place because your code was too complex.
Exactly, yeah.
But these are the kinds of things. Yeah, so
there's so much we can talk about with that as well.
There is.
We'll have to make that topic for next week.
I think it's absolutely. I think it's a whole topic in itself of refactoring, and also just development process, to make sure that people don't, or projects don't get in a situation where there's too much technical debt. You can never catch up.
Yeah. So anyway, coming back to the topic. So I'm kind of not in the rewriting mode. I'm in the refactoring and redesign mode.
I like that. I'm not in the rewriting business. I'm in the refactoring.
There is always the temptation to start again, and sometimes I think it's when you look at something and you're just so overwhelmed, that it can't be fixed. And me and Bill kind of I go back and forth on this. Bill is thought is, as far as I know, is to always refactor. But I think there is certain times you look at an entire project and you think it would actually be quicker just to start over again, and even start over again with tests and do everything right. And I think it's sometimes that there are perhaps projects which are so far gone. But then the problem is going back to the business goals. You can't just rewrite an entire project because there won't be any progress.
Expensive.
So refactoring and redesigning can always be done. No matter, there is difficulty to it. There are varying degrees of difficulty, and if you're starting from a project which has no design, then you're going to have huge problems doing it. But you can do it. It's just that much more difficult.
I guess my main caveat is that as long as the new code being added is being added in a way which is consistent with what you wanted to end up with, then it can ultimately be reached over time, even if it takes a year. It means you can actually progress the platform or tool or product and get to the refactor that you want.
It's another argument towards keeping your code base lean as well, making sure you don't put something in until you need it, and the stuff you don't need anymore, take that out. That's what source control's for. I mean, you can come back to it later.
Exactly, yeah.
And there's another way you can, before you start refactoring a very large project, is doing analysis on it. You can look at the high-risk code. You can analyze for functions which are used in multiple places that if they were changed, they would break, or dependent modules, dependency checking, stuff like that. Again, this is a whole topic. Maybe we should save it for another podcast.
Yeah, I'm now adding it to the thing. Code audits, because I want to talk about code audits. I want to talk about test-driven development.
Oh my god, we could go on for hours.
It's like an extra credits thing where we just have topics from 3 years ago that we eventually get to.
Yeah,
that's good though. Yeah. We'll never run out of content.
So I want to keep this to an hour for the sake of people listening and for the sake of our own lives, because I have to go and eat dinner now. So
it's cool.
Wrap this up.
Yes, so we should do shameless plugs for things or projects that you have going or whatever. Who wants to go first?
Alphabetical order.
I have a shameless plug for the iPhone 6 Plus. I really like it. Go and buy one.
That's not a shameless plug. It's supposed to be a personal thing. Were you involved in the design?
No, I just use it.
He was involved in the process because he paid for one, right?
I paid for one and I got it and it works.
Cool. Nice.
All right. So do you have anything else?
Fluebits. Just go and install Fluebits and play with it.
All right then. So I have a YouTube channel which is not being updated very frequently at the moment, but it's youtube.com/BigToolBill. And that's all I have really. I have a Twitter account as well, which is twitter.com/BigToolBill. Everything I have is /BigToolBill. That's it really.
Cool. For me then, I'm going to plug one other thing that isn't my own first, and that's extra credits, because I just mentioned them. And if you don't watch extra credit videos, watch them. They're centered around the games industry, but everything about them is completely applicable to anyone designing products or experiences in general. Definitely awesome. For myself, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm iCrow, spelled incredibly difficultly, and no one can ever read it right, and I don't blame them, but that's IQROW. It's the best username that I use on everything, and no one understands it. Everyone reads it as IQ and then I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway.
I understood what it was when I first saw it.
Well, then you are of a very small percentile, and I have considered changing my online handle, but I'm now old enough that I can't. So
I guess I should add my Twitter handle, which is Whoop WUP. I'm actively not seeking for anyone to contact me, so please don't send me a message.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't tweet at me either. It's just
please don't tweet me.
I'm basically a retweeter of other game sources like Kotaku. I'm essentially just another. I'm a mirror. So you might not find any interesting content.
My Twitter account is automated, but I would reply to something if someone actually sent me anything.
Oh, guys, no one follow us, please. It's just.
Please don't send any emails. Don't tweet us. Don't even subscribe to this podcast. Whatever you do.
No, do that.
Can
we
they?
run that one?
Well, they will if I put it somewhere where they can.
On YouTube.
And if If we get any listeners before we pick a name, then tell us a name and we'll consider it.
That's a good idea because we can't figure out a name.
Otherwise, we do the thing where we randomly open a dictionary and choose one of those.
Yeah.
What? You actually have a physical dictionary?
No, I was just thinking that. I'm like looking around my room, like, what could I open?
Google.
No. Oh man, we didn't even get to talk about efficiency tools. I want to talk about that next week. There's some really cool ones. So anyway, let's wrap this up. Do we have? Should we just? You guys, you said cheerio and pip pip first time round, right? So
I think so. So we should.
Ta-ra for now.
Sayonara.
ta-ra.
Get lost.